You can comp at a slow tempo, but as soon as it gets to an up tempo, you sound awkward. It's because you don't have authentic jazz vocabulary for up tempo. So today, I'm going to be breaking down 4 Philly Joe Jones comping phrases from 2 bass hit so you can start sounding authentic on any tempo today. Let's jump right into the first example. Every idea that we're going to cover in this video is on my 15 Philly Joe Jones comping phrases PDF. If you want that, just click the link in the description. You can follow along. So this first one is one of the most common Philly Joe Jones comping phrases that I hear everybody use all the time. It just sounds like this, right? And to play it a little slower so you can really digest it. Now, for this phrase, there's a couple things you need to know why it works. The first is that, and this is going to be the theme with the Philly Joe stuff, it has a really clear accent. It has a clear accent on beat 4, where that big release is with the hi-hat. Right? Bones. Right? And that's really the thing that brings out Philly Joe's authenticity, his really unique voice, is that he puts clear accents in his comping. It's not just all flat. Right? You want to have a clear accent on beat 4. As strong as you can. Now, the other thing that's really important with this phrase is where he uses it in the form. In this recording and in so many other recordings, you're going to hear Philly Joe play this at the top of the form, okay? So this is kind of like a little release. It's kind of like he hits beat 1, and that kind of goes like this. Right? It's almost like in, out, like tension, release, right? And if you do this, your band will always get this. If there's some cats who really know what's going on. Like I remember playing this gig with this really great bass player in Chicago, and every time I played beat 4, especially if it was at the top of the chorus, he would play that beat 4, he would hold a long note with me, and it just sounded like we were so connected. That's why this phrase is just maybe the most influential Philly Joe Jones phrase that you just need to get into your playing today. Let's go ahead and jump into the next phrase where he goes even deeper with this accent idea. All right, this idea sounds like this. Right? Again, a big accent on B4. He uses it in a different part of the form. What I really like about this is the big accent on the and then the triplets are kind of ghosted, right? Right? And that brings out that beat 4 bass drum a lot more. Now, another thing I want to point out on this, and this is really subtle. One of my students, Shay, shout out to Shay out in Jersey, wonderful, talented young drummer. He was transcribing this, this Philly Joe Jones comping, and he pointed out, because he learned it from the record, he heard this subtle thing that you wouldn't get if you just get it off of a page. He noticed that Philly kind of dead sticks that left hand double, right? So instead of going, right, he actually holds the stick into the drum after the double, which gets that kind of, right? Just like the last one, I was saying how it kind of goes in and then out. This one kind of goes out and then in with the dead stroke. So, right? So that's really important. That's why it's so important that you be like Shay and you actually learn this stuff from the recording. That's why I put the recordings in these videos so that you get the subtlety and the authenticity from actually transcribing it. Now, the next Philly Joe Jones thing, it's going to give some more of that accent kind of vibe, but with some coordination that's going to be a little trickier. Let's listen to the next one. All right, the next phrase sounds like this. Right? The big important thing here is accents, right? So he's not playing, he's playing, right? I'm exaggerating the accents a little bit, but that is the important part that makes it really authentic sounding. Philly has a bunch of dynamics in his left hand, a bunch of subtlety, and that's a big part of his style. That's how you sound authentic, okay? So this one in particular, I recommend playing it really slow because the coordination is tricky to keep the drive in your ride cymbal while getting that accent in your left hand. So I would start at a tempo like this. Maybe even start by playing it all low. and then keep those low and add the accents in. Now, when you first do this, that's going to be a lot of coordination for you. So it's important to go slow and really think through every note. But the way you get this fast is actually as you go faster, you think less about it. You kind of space out. Instead of trying to control every accent, you just get the idea and the motion and the shape of it. And naturally, your accents will get a little bit lower, but because it's faster, it'll be plenty. And you just relax your brain and kind of let it go on autopilot. Since you did it slow, it will come out naturally. This is what that's going to sound like. Okay, you can see, boom. By the end, my accents were like this high, but there was still a strong difference between the accents and the taps. And that's really what brings out that authentic Philly sound. Now, in a second, I'm going to show you how to make these Philly ideas your own. But before we do that, let's check out one more idea from Two Bass Hit. All right, this idea sounds like this. Okay, cool. This is the first idea where we're actually breaking up the time. So I'm not keeping the ride cymbal going. Philly does this kind of at the end of a phrase. He adds these crashes. Again, clear accents. That's the thing that makes Philly Joe Jones so subtle, is that he has clear accents. It's not just flat. It has some vibe, some personality, and some attitude. But here, it's just a different texture where I'm breaking up the ride. Okay? Now, here's the thing. We have all these Philly Joe Jones ideas, but so far, we've only done the first of the 3 steps that I have for vocabulary, okay? And it's 3 C's that you need to remember. The first is copy. That's where you try to play the phrase at the tempo they played it and get all the subtleties, the things like the technique, the accents, the touch, right? That's what we did so far, okay? But if you do that, you're going to feel like you're just kind of plug and playing the same ideas, and it's going to feel very stale at a certain point. So you need a way to kind of make them your own and make them more flexible so you can use them in lots of different situations. And that's the second C, which is create, okay? So create is where you take the idea and you do what we call molding like clay. Imagine you had a piece of clay, and before you made a sculpture, you just played around with it. You stretched it out, you flattened it, you rolled it into a ball just to kind of see how it feels and how it acts. And then you have a better idea of what you can make, what kind of structure it will hold into, right? And that's what we need to do with these ideas. Let me show you what I mean, okay? So if I was going to start with this idea first. Okay, the important thing in that idea is the difference between the accents and the taps, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make more of that. I'm going to mess around with it, make it shorter, longer, backwards, forwards, on beats, off beats, but with the idea of accent and taps. Let's try it. So there you see, I just generated a bunch of ideas that kind of feel like Philly Joe Jones. They kind of taste like Philly Joe Jones, but they're my own original ideas. They're my variations. They're kind of my take on Philly Joe Jones. And this is how you develop your own voice. This is what art is, okay? You listen to things you like, you imitate them, you figure out how they were made, and then you make your own things based on your influence. Right? That's how art works. Let's do the same thing. Let's do the create phase with another Philly Joe Jones phrase. Let's use this triplet one. Okay. So, okay, that's the original phrase. I'm going to mess around with a couple things. I'm going to mess around with triplets. I'm going to mess around with this dead stick. I'm going to mess around with accents and taps. And I'm going to mess around with maybe landing on the bass drum. Let's see what I can make. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, there you go. So I got a couple more ideas out of that. I don't know if you noticed, I actually mixed in another Philly Joe Jones idea that released on 4, right? Just because I was hearing it, because I've been studying all this Philly Joe Jones stuff, okay? And that's what's going to happen when you really start to mold this like clay. It becomes a part of your vocabulary. Now, remember, I said there's 3 steps. There's 3 C's. We had copy, we had create, and there is one more if you really want to get it into your playing. Before we do that, this is just one thing that you need to work on for your jazz playing. It's vocabulary, but you also need to know the form of the tune. You also need to know how to interact with the soloist, and you need to know how to show up on a gig so that you sound good and people want to hire you and maybe have you back for more gigs, or maybe you get into a college for jazz. Those are things that I help my students with. If you're interested in becoming a student, kind of like Shay is, click the link in the description and you can reach out, get some more information, maybe set up a time for us to meet. And that brings us to the 3rd C. We had copy, so you make sure you get all the subtleties, the accents, the things that make Philly Philly. We have create, so that you take the ideas, you make them your own, you make them flexible enough that they show up, and you make them sound like you, right? And then the last thing is you have to make sure they actually come out when it's game time. And that's the 3rd C, which is context, okay? To put it with a real musical example. So the exercise that we're gonna do today is to do a Philly Joe Jones impression, right? And I'm not gonna do a voice, that's not the vibe. What I mean is that I'm gonna play along with 2 bass hit. I have a little drumless version of it. And I'm gonna try to play in the style of Philly. Now, I can play other things. My goal is more to like kind of flow here, right? So if other things come in, that's totally cool. I'm gonna try to use some of the accents, some of the releases, some of the bass drum stuff, maybe some dead stick. But overall, my goal is to just kind of play in the vibe of Philly with 2 bass hit. Let's go ahead and give it a go. So there you go. If you use accents like Philly Joe Jones, you're going to sound authentic at fast tempos. If you want the 15 Philly Joe Jones comping phrases PDF, click the link in the description to get it. And now that you're comping like Philly, you're going to need to learn to solo like Philly. So click here to watch my video on 3 Philly Joe Jones triplet ideas that every jazz drummer should learn.